Shut your fucking mouth. I kissed his ass way too much. Don't tell me. Focus. What the fuck is wrong with y'all? I got a decision to make this thing. What the fuck is wrong with y'all right now?
This is really freaking bad. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen something like this before. I mean, I have seen fights occur in the middle of games before, but not when the stakes were this big in a very pivotal game that could determine the team's seeding and the standings going into the playoffs. So before we get to the content, this video is definitely going to get demonetized. So if you could take a minute to leave a like to help push us in the algorithm, that'd be really much appreciated. And on a different note, I wanted to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for 700,000 subscribers, man. I can't even put into words how much this job means to me, the purpose it gives me, and each and every day when I wake up, I have a huge smile on my face, and it's all because of you guys, and I never take it for granted, not even for a second. Now, I don't want to draw out the intro too much, so now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Some of the green slips you guys have been sending me is crazy. Like $1,250 off of a $250 slip, or $1,500 off of a $150 power play. We've been making bank off of our basketball picks, bro. March Madness was a huge success, and believe me, we're about to ramp it up for the NBA playoffs. All you have to do is download Prize Picks, use my promo code microphone, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100 instantly. After that, just follow me on Instagram. I post all of my picks onto my Instagram story for free, and we can start making money off of these picks together. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The Minnesota Timberwolves decided to make a pivotal decision this past offseason. This was officially the Timberwolves taking all of their chips and putting it in the center and saying that they were all in. I don't necessarily know if this was the move to make, but regardless, they decided to make it. They did so by trading for Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz, a 30-year-old center who, to be honest, is one of the best defensive players in the NBA, but there are questions about his fit on a modern NBA team. Regardless, this didn't stop the Timberwolves from trading Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Leandro Bolmaro, Walker Kessler, who was the 22nd pick in the 2022 NBA draft, Jared Vanderbilt, 4 first-round picks, and a 2026 pick swap. This was met with a couple of eyebrow raises. Then there was a lot of people feeling conflicted about this deal. From the get-go, I thought this was a huge overpay by the Minnesota Timberwolves, primarily because Rudy Gobert might have a few years left in the tank. He also is getting paid a significant amount of money for being a center that doesn't necessarily fit into modern NBA offenses. But at the exact same time, you're giving up 4 future first-round picks and a pick swap for a player that has a great chance of not panning out on the roster. But at the same time, I do admit, the starting 5 for the Minnesota Timberwolves looked pretty freaking sweet following this deal. I mean, you had D'Angelo Russell at the point guard position. You had Anthony Edwards, who was looking like a star at the shooting guard position. You had Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert starting as well. And honestly, it didn't really matter who you plugged in at the 3 at that point. But it didn't take very long for us to see that this trade just simply wasn't working out. Primarily because the Minnesota Timberwolves didn't really seem to know how to use Rudy Gobert. They weren't really putting him in situations to succeed. Rudy Gobert primarily thrives as a screener. He's one of the best screeners in the entire NBA, finishing within the top 3 in screen assists during his final season with the Utah Jazz. Now, what further made me feel like this decision wasn't necessarily the most intelligent one was when you compare the package that the Utah Jazz got for Rudy Gobert to the one that they got for Donovan Mitchell. It clearly makes it seem like the Minnesota Timberwolves had a huge overpay, because the Cleveland Cavaliers sent Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, Colin Sexton, 3 unprotected first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps for Donovan Mitchell, a player that is quite literally in his prime right now. The fact that you could even compare these 2 deals could give you an idea of how much of an overpay truly was for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And as the season went on, we had an idea more and more that this was a horrific mistake, and there were things done so the Minnesota Timberwolves could potentially appease Rudy Gobert. They doubled down on it even further. When things weren't going well, they for some reason thought it'd be a good idea, and I'm happy about this as a Laker fan, but they decided that it would be a good idea to trade for Rudy Gobert's point guard when he was a member of the Utah Jazz, at least in the latter part of his career. The Minnesota Timberwolves thought it'd be a good idea to trade Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and D'Angelo Russell, and receive Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in return. Now, why am I rehashing all this? Well, currently the Utah Jazz are in a tough situation. They're fighting for their life to stay in the play-in. At the very minimum, they'll be a 9th seed, but there's a chance that they could be an 8th seed or even a 7th seed based upon how the Los Angeles Lakers finished. They had a pivotal game today versus the New Orleans Pelicans, who happened to be the 8th seed. So this is like the pre-play-in. I mean, if you look at their records, the Pelicans are 42-39, the Timberwolves are 41-40. If they beat the Pelicans, they could potentially hop over them in the play-in tournament. Now, I want you guys to understand the significance of this because it's very important. If a team is an 8th seed in the play-in tournament, that means they only need to win one game in order to advance to the playoffs. However, if a team is a 9 or a 10 seed in the play-in tournament, that means they have to win 2 straight games that are win or go home in order to become the 8th seed in the playoffs. So there should be no doubt in your mind whatsoever about the significance of this game between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New Orleans Pelicans. It could have severe playoff implications for both teams. So a lot was on the line in this game, and you could see tensions really flared up in the middle of this game. Because in the middle of the game, Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert had a few words to say to one another. And the result of Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert talking to one another was Rudy Gobert decided to punch Kyle Anderson, and then they had to get separated by teammates. Now, there's a significant amount of irony to this particular moment, because a while ago, Rudy Gobert was actually questioned about Kyle Anderson's leadership style, and he had this to say about it. Sometimes he's a little aggressive in the way he talks, but I don't take it personally. I'm no expert or anything like that, but I think he took it personally in this particular case. Now, here's the crazy part. The NBA has just gone wild today. I mean, in a completely separate game, you saw Mason Plumlee and Bones Highland, 2 new additions during the trade deadline for the Clippers. They got into it on the bench for the Los Angeles Clippers in a very important game for the Los Angeles Clippers as well. But in the same exact game between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New Orleans Pelicans, you would later on see Jaden McDaniels fracturing his hand by punching a wall. To be honest, I've made this mistake many a times. You think it's a good idea. It's never a good idea. Your hand never goes through the wall. You never pull out your hand and say, oh, I didn't feel like nothing happened to me. Every time it happens, you fracture your hand. Never try to punch a hole in the wall. So the result of this was Rudy Gobert would get sent home by the Minnesota Timberwolves after throwing a punch at Kyle Anderson, and Shams Charania reported that he would be out for the remainder of the game. Wildly enough, the game between the New Orleans Pelicans and the Minnesota Timberwolves would actually go down to the wire without both Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. So you might be wondering what instigated this fight to begin with. And to be honest, it's a huge reason why it took us so long to get you this video, because I myself very much am interested in knowing the backstories of these events, and it seemed like we were rewarded for our patience, because according to Adrian Wojnarowski, this is what apparently went down. Minnesota's Rudy Gobert escalated a verbal argument into a physical encounter after Kyle Anderson told him to shut the fuck up, bitch.
Shut up, bitch! Oh my God!
Yeah, he pretty much pulled one of those. The disagreement started with Anderson telling Gobert to block some shots. Gobert told him to grab a rebound, and it ended with a punch and Gobert getting sent home. I really think that Rudy Gobert's contract and the amount that the Timberwolves gave up to get him definitely factors into this somehow, because I can see Kyle Anderson looking at Rudy Gobert and saying, hey, you're one of the highest paid players on this team, block some shots, and Rudy Gobert clapping back at Kyle Anderson saying what he did. At the same time, this is a game that had just so much on the line, so I can understand why tempers would flare. Now, Rudy Gobert would send an apologetic text to his teammates in a group chat later on, and per Mike Conley, we'll speak about it and move on. We're grown men.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
We're just innocent men.
I mean, as a Laker fan, I would love to see Rudy Gobert suspended for a few games, but maybe I'm a little biased. Now, the wildest part of this situation is, believe it or not, despite the Minnesota Timberwolves losing 2 of their key players, they actually ended up winning this game against the New Orleans Pelicans, which, given everything that went down, is very, very impressive. Bear in mind, this is a game where Brandon Ingram had over 40 points, but Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards and Taurean Prince really stepped up for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and as a result, the Timberwolves have a pretty nice situation going into the play-in tournament. There's actually some drama for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the play-in tournament, as it looks like D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt are going to have an opportunity to take on the team that traded them during the trade deadline. The Los Angeles Lakers are facing off against the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round of the play-in. The winner of that matchup between the Lakers and the Timberwolves will be the 7th seed in the Western Conference playoffs, meaning that they will face off against the Memphis Grizzlies. The loser will have to play the winner of the game between the OKC Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans for a chance to play against the Denver Nuggets as the 8th seed in the playoffs. Just a wild day for basketball in general. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about the Minnesota Timberwolves right now? Do you think they were just really intense at the heat of the moment, or do you think there's actual frustration between these players, possibly as a result of the compensation they gave up for Rudy Gobert? Maybe Rudy Gobert's teammates don't like him. What I also thought was really funny is, take a look at this. This is peak Draymond Green. You remember when Draymond Green punched Jordan Poole and Rudy Gobert said insecurity is loud? Well, Draymond Green clapped back at Rudy Gobert for punching his teammate by tweeting out, insecurity is always loud. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.